Good B-roll, actually. The lens is clear, and now you see this beautiful smiling face.
Hey universe, this is Joseph Irwin with the Cosmic Embassy, and I just got back from Virginia and also the Washington DC Mass Meditation event, Disclosure Fest, represent, and I'm so excited. I got to spend a week with Justin Deschamps in Virginia after the Washington DC event. This video is going to be called How Stillness in the Storm is Made, so just type furiously. Alright. And we went really deep, went into nature, went to some waterfalls, as well as made some music. Disclosure music is on its way, be excited. Spread my wings and I fly so well. And also we did these Imagineering sessions that just kind of came out of nowhere, this kind of new practice, which was us essentially projecting ourselves into future desirable timelines and just really fleshing out that momentum, letting that momentum build. Look forward to more of that as well. But what I'm going to offer you in this video, obviously, is an interview with Justin. We talk about stillness in the storm, how I found it, how it has helped me on my path, as well as just a lot of other really profound things. So I'm really proud about this interview. I hope you like it. Please subscribe and comment below once you're done watching. Thanks. I just want to start off by talking a little bit about Stillness in the Storm. So Stillness in the Storm is a website. Somehow I was able to find Stillness in the Storm shortly after its creation. It's really incredible actually that I was just magnetized to it like right at the start. But the reason it was really powerful for me is because I had been maybe a year or two into my awakening, and I just realized that most of the information out there is complete fraud, BS. And with that realization, you become very turned off by a lot of information. And so I had very few sources that were kind of like my trusted sources, people that I agreed with. One of those was without doubt Stillness in the Storm. And it was really amazing to me how so much information was being put on this website that was so relevant to everything that I was doing, everything I was learning. And so that's what sold me on Justin and Stillness in the Storm years ago. I already knew he was my friend just based on the articles that he was posting and his thoughts, etc. So tell us just a little bit, kind of a summary of your work with Stillness.
Sure. Well, I started Stillness in the Storm with my partner Julian. We actually started it as a radio show in March of 2013. And we were about 3.5 years into our awakening at that point. And we were just pouring through everything we possibly could. I mean, for me, when my awakening started, it started because Julian had discovered this film called The Gerson Miracle, and was talking about cures for cancer. And I was somebody who's really scientific. I felt like I had, had a good grasp of what was real and what wasn't. And this film talking about how this guy supposedly cured cancer in the 20s just completely unraveled my sense of reality, because my science mind was seeing the merit of what was being discussed, but my, my matrix self, if you will, was saying, no, this can't be true. Yeah. So,
why haven't we heard of this already?
Exactly, yeah. So I had what I call a conceptual crisis, which is there's some new little piece of information that I discovered that, because I couldn't dismiss it, was starting to slowly alchemize and catalyze my whole consciousness. And at the end of a 3-month process, I was questioning everything I could get my hands on. Every belief, everything that I thought was true, I was questioning. And I was even questioning, how do I even know this stuff is true?
Totally.
Because we spend most of our lives walking around with these beliefs, but how do you really know if your beliefs is true or not, right?
Totally.
So,
so the cracks became apparent in the old belief.
Exactly. It's kind of like, you could make an analogy, like you're using a map to navigate, go somewhere. And if you've been using the same map for, 20 years, the same map you got when you were 60 years old is probably not going to be as good as one that you could create now. Totally. And that's kind of like that moment that I had. So Stillness was really about it started because we had just amassed a whole bunch of research and information. We felt like it was part of our duty to share it with the world. Not as experts, not as people who were saying, well, our version of the truth is true and you have to believe ours. No, we wanted to enter a discussion and say, listen, we're all seeking the truth. Why don't we all come to the table together and put our truths on the table? Let's compare all of our different perspectives and see if we can come up with a bigger truth that explains everybody's personal truth. That's kind of the philosophy that we entered it into with.
I love that. It's like he felt the information and the inspiration was so ripe.
Yes.
That it's as if the apple had to drop. Like he had to do something with this.
Right.
And that's why I'm making these videos. It's the same
yeah, it's like
feeling.
a calling, right?
Totally.
Yeah, totally.
And also just the understanding that obviously there's a void for this type of information, or somebody would have been doing it already. Somebody would have been keeping that conversation alive already.
Exactly.
And since you felt so drawn to do it, you know, it's obvious that I don't want to say you were meant to do it, but maybe you were the path of least resistance in this thing that had to happen.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Well, it's interesting because when we started Stillness in the Storm, we were just sharing our personal experience. We were doing a lot of law research at the time, but also research into consciousness, healing cures, extraterrestrials, things like this. And we started to realize that there was an absence of kind of what you might call like discussion in the awakening community. A lot of what we were seeing in the awakening or truther movement was people like furiously trying to wave their flag of truth to get other people to believe. You know? And I wasn't seeing a lot of like discussion about, well, why should I believe this over that, and like how do we really discern this, and you know, what is that process, what does that look like? So it became apparent to me really early on that because of my kind of scientific philosophic leanings, and because I wanted a really rich, deep understanding of why something was true, I had this space I could fill. So I started doing a lot of research on philosophy, epistemology, like how do we actually understand the truths that we're using to guide our lives? And eventually Stillness turned into something where the unique niche is I'm sharing information I'm researching, so news, you know, reports, insiders, various things like this. But I'm also adding well, let's analyze this, let's discuss this, let's add in a discussion portion of it so we can both, people can come to the negotiating table and we can collectively seek the truth together instead of trying to beat each other over the bat with our truths.
So good.
So that's kind of the philosophy behind it.
So good. And I'm so grateful for that, because what he's essentially saying is I've come to certain conclusions, but I'm not dogmatic in my conclusions, and therefore because I'm not dogmatic, I'm willing to hear other people's opinions and maybe adjust mine if I feel these opinions are more valid or more truthful or the next extension of my truth. And I think that's so important because it's really easy for people to get locked up in their belief patterns, which can be good to a time, but everything in the universe is in flux.
Right.
You know, and the more we're in that understanding, the more we're evolving and growing and healthy on a spiritual and physical level, because we're being a player in that flow. We're being part of that river instead of struggling against it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's really great. And that brings in something that you talk about a lot, which I really appreciate, and I want to bring this in, which is discernment. And on my path, the only reason I got here, that I'm sitting with Justin and with as much clarity as I have, is not because I was told one truth and I was like, oh my God, yes. It was because I took the time to wade through just a vast amount of information. And some of it I know now is total propaganda. Some of it is something that looked really, really good, but maybe was some disinformation. And some of it's just well-meaning people that aren't seeing the whole picture. But I had to look, and I still have to look through all of this data so that I can discern the truth, so that I can find those gems in the rough, you know. And I feel like for me, this path is so valuable and so worth it, because every time you might dig through a whole bunch of BS,
right?
But when you find like a David Wilcock, or you find like a diamond, something that stands up on its own and has strength on its own, that's when it makes it all worth it too. And then you can kind of compare all these other things to that. So, but discernment is so important, because how do I decide if something's true? Because clearly I can't go to Snoop's, and I can't trust anything on the television to tell me what's true. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful I don't externalize my truth meter.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, I think discernment, there's multiple different meanings. So let me see if we can address some of them.
Sure.
So normally people think discernment, they're thinking, what is the answer to the question of whether this is true or not? And that's kind of where they want to leave it. Like, when you're asking a discernment question, usually you want to know yes or no, this is true, right? And that's beneficial to a certain point, but I would actually expand it to say discernment's more of a process than it is about getting a black and white answer.
Totally.
It's more of an exploration.
Totally.
So when we think about discernment, we would do well to acknowledge some fundamental aspects of reality. So let me just lay these out here.
Sure, please.
First of all, we have to realize that discernment is about properly recording the information that we're swimming through in our experience inside of us. So we have these record-keeping devices we call consciousness that's constantly storing memories, and memories are like imprints or reflections of reality and experience. So when we talk about discernment, we're really talking about the process of accurately reflecting reality within. Okay? So what that means is that when we're discerning something, like let's take a claim for example, like if you say you had a plebeian show up this morning, while you were eating breakfast. Well, if I wasn't physically there, how could I know that your claim is true? Well, we'd have to look at potential evidence. Maybe there was some physical evidence of them being there. We could go and look at the crime scene, We have your testimony, right? And then we have, potentially, we could find to see if there's some footage of something that we could look for. But we're looking for evidence. So we have this claim that you say that you had an experience, and we want to find some evidence to support it. So what discernment is really about is looking to take that claim and then see how much evidence is there, and then after we build the case of evidence and we investigate that evidence, then we have to make some type of assessment. Say, okay, well, how much evidence do we have to say that your experience is true based off of what I know? And then how reliable is that assessment? So for my perspective, I wasn't there. I didn't see the plebeian, but you did. So as far as like the discernment of the experience, you have a whole lot more raw information because of your raw experience to support your experience than I do to support your experience. So the rating at which I can place certainty on your experience is less than it is for you. So what I want to highlight there is that discernment is much, in that situation, discernment is much less about me saying unquestionably I have blind total faith in your experience. It is about I have a good guess. And because it's a guess, it leaves me open. I can be open to the fact that it could be true, or I can open to the fact that it isn't true. And it's that openness when it comes to discernment that I think is something that we might miss in our process, because we tend to want to get to the answer.
Sure.
So the last thing I'll say about discernment is that once you've done the process, you have to make a conclusion. You have to make a decision. Like, okay, well, what am I going to decide? I don't know if your experience is 100% true because I wasn't there, but do I have any reason not to believe you? And if we're in this kind of uncertain place, which most discernment processes end up in that place, we want to come up with what I call an operational conclusion, or a best guess. So I'm going to say, well, Joe, yeah, it does seem like you had that experience. I don't have anything in my body of evidence during my investigation to say you were lying or it was untrue, so I'm going to act as if it is true, provisionally, in an open-minded way, and we'll see what happens. So that's kind of the very rough sketch of the discernment we can have time.
And where do you, what value do you put, or rather where in the equation does like the internal discernment or like the emotional, or like the discernment that one receives by tapping into their heart and into their soul.
Right, that's what I would call intuitive discernment or insightful discernment. So intuition is a kind of internal seeing or a sense perception, right? So it's very similar to a physical sense. So when we get an intuitive or emotional hit, let's say you hear something and it resonates with you, it just seems to jive with what you think it should be true, right? Well, that resonance is what that's happening there at a consciousness level, is the thing that you are evaluating. Let's say you want to believe that I don't know, there's going to be some big ascension event in the next year. Well, if that belief gives you a lot of value because it aligns with what you want, then it's going to resonate for you. That doesn't necessarily mean it's true, though. So when it comes to emotional resonance is just one piece of the data collection pie, I like to say.
Totally.
Right? So you could get an intuitive hit. That intuitive hit could resonate strongly. It could feel very true. And I would suggest that you take your intuitive hit and go out and try to gather other data to see if you can confirm it.
Sure.
You know, just like if you were doing a very scientific process, you'd want to use more of your intuition. So you want to blend the two together.
Totally. And I would say that if something is true and you get an emotional or heart intuition about it, then the universe is capable and willing and ready to also deliver corroborating evidence in the direction of that. Right. So it's not like you'll just be relying on that emotional forever.
Right. And the thing to really avoid is personal dogma. You know, if your intuition, if you feel so secure in your intuition that you're not willing to look anywhere else, to even consider that maybe you might be wrong, then it's not really a I'm seeking the truth frame of mind. It's a I'm confirming what I want to believe frame of mind.
Totally. And a lot of our society is in that state of being. I'm confirming what I want to believe, which is understandable, but we as beings who are kind of riding the leading edge and also riding the middle path have to be extra careful not to become dogmatic, because the whole purpose of this is to kind of break up the patterns and the dogma.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, which is exciting. It's an exciting time to be. So forward looking, man, what are you excited about just in general, being alive, and then maybe in relation to stillness or not, doesn't really matter.
Well, this past year has been huge for me, and I've been going through a lot of personal shifts. I've been doing a lot of research into what I'm kind of calling the more mundane aspects of the control system, like interpersonal relationships, how we think, the relationships we have with ourselves, how we define our reality.
That's a key one.
Yeah, huge one. Probably the most important relationship ever. And really looking at how our culture and how we relate to each other, because I'm at this point in my awakening process where I've kind of accumulated a lot of nuts and bolts solutions, I might say, like cures for cancer and free energy technology and things like this. But now I want to look at, okay, well, how do I actually take this amazing solutions and how do we actually make them a reality in our world?
Totally.
And when I started to investigate that question, the answer I came to was, oh my God, like every solution you could think of eventually has to pass through the social sphere. I have to actually tell somebody about it, which means I have to learn like people skills and, you know, how to share my ideas non-combatively and, you know, that kind of thing. So a lot of the research I've been doing and work I've been doing lately is understanding how we are programmed as children, how that programming affects our ability to be open and receptive to other people, how our culture hinders and influences us in our ability to speak with each other. So I'm really excited to bring through what I'm calling the ideal self technique body of work. So I've been doing a lot of work on how to self-actualize, how to clear through trauma, and how to actually become the higher self, become the what I call the ideal self. And I've kind of been doing this organically my whole life, and I didn't realize it until very recently. So now I've been distilling a lot of that wisdom, and I'm going to be releasing a book very soon about all of this stuff. So
Well, it makes sense that all the things of your childhood and all the things that led you to now would be echoed in you now and in the creation that you're creating.
Right.
And I would hope that what you're creating now is the ever unfolding fractal pinnacle of that which is Deschamps. This is why we hang out.
The unfolding. Right. Yeah, so and there's lots of great stuff. I mean, like yourself, I'm a very fruitful thinker. I think anybody who's gone through awakening just probably has this experience where you're kind of like stuck in your cocoon for most of your life, and you weren't doing a lot of like exploration in your mind and consciousness, and then you have this awakening, and it's like all of your old patterns are ripped away from you, and now there's this like explosion of creativity, and it's like you're looking at things differently. And tell me you're not feeling that.
Yes, yes.
So like every day, and I know I've been with you for the past few days, so I know you resonate with this.
Yeah.
Every day is this like new adventure where I'm like receiving insights and inspiration, and I'm looking to the universe like, what are you going to teach me today? How am I going to be offered an opportunity to learn and grow? And because I have that consciousness, I'm constantly receiving like insights. I'm like scrambling to write them down and process them.
So key. We're always being given guidance. We're always being fed information quite literally through our consciousness. And it's so funny because we've been taught that we're so cut off from our source of information, and information only comes from a physical experience outside of myself, but nothing could be further from the truth, because the truth is we're streaming experience quite literally, and often we've externalized that, which is fine, and that's part of everything, but it's really wise to basically listen more, and maybe not with my ears, but listen with my consciousness, the information that's coming forward. Like what are my personal inspirations? What is the information that just keeps coming to my mind, keeps coming to my mind? What am I attracting? What am I magnetizing? How is that growing? Am I honoring that guidance by walking towards it, or by creating in the direction of it? And I'll know because I'll feel really good if I am.
Exactly.
And if I'm not feeling good, then I'm basically not walking the path that my source is walking, and I'm going to feel that dissonance.
Exactly. Yeah, I think part of your emotional process is to guide you. And psychologically, when we're not feeling satisfied with our experience, it's because there's something we're not getting. Either our expectations aren't being met, or we're off of the path. So by recognizing that you've slipped out of your ideal emotional place, you can say, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Is there something inside of me that I need to change to get back on the path? Is there something that in my environment that I need to change or augment, or maybe come to terms with to get me back on the path?
Totally.
The allowance, we talked a lot about allowance over the past few days. So.
And sometimes it can be an action. Like, oh, I just need to go take a nap, or I need to take a shower, or, whatever. But the best action I've found is definitely an action of vibration, or an action of thought. And it's really powerful when you come to the point when you realize you're not a victim to whatever emotional state you're in.
Yes.
That you have the ability to pivot. And that's a really powerful moment when you realize that you can consciously pivot your energy towards what is wanted, which is feeling good.
Exactly. Yeah, I'll mention this. One of the techniques I discovered, or I had downloaded this summer, was about a process of mind alchemy. So we have this, what I call the characterological structure of frame. It's like who you think you are is this kind of like background impression that's always on you, so to speak. It's like a lens, but you don't really see it. And I was trying to figure out like the mechanics of like, okay, well, what does it actually take somebody to shift their perspective and consciousness? So I tried the intellectual, like build an argument round. Like, let's say you want to feel more empowered, so you write down all the reasons why you want to feel more empowered, and why you are, and what your evidence is, and why the logic is great there. And that's really helpful, but it doesn't necessarily create the feeling.
Sure.
So then I chose a different avenue. I'm like, well, let me try to create a feeling structure. Imagine the feeling that I want to be at first, and then I'll marry that to the intellectual structure. Because one of the things that the intellectual structure does, the philosophy, is it creates this container in consciousness for the emotional energy to kind of stay in. And without that, then it's hard to keep that affirmation structure. So in my studies, using both is actually a really good method. So I developed this technique. So imagine yourself in a situation that you're not necessarily the most ideal, like your job, right? Job you don't necessarily like. Now I want you to imagine that you are absolutely happy, beautifully supported, you're totally into your job, you're feeling just waves of bliss, you're just kind of like you coming down from your bedroom on Christmas, or your day of your birthday, or some adventure. Like, picture that beautiful moment when you were a child and it was just like you were just so happy and elated. Now take that feeling and bring it into your job. Don't worry about the details, just imagine yourself being there. And if you can hold that for like a minute, then what'll happen is your mind will start to assemble a logical argument to support that for you.
Yes.
And you want both. So the logic is going to give you that structure, and then if you can hold that for a few more minutes, we were talking about this weekend, the power of holding something.
Yes,
momentum. It'll literally entrain your consciousness, and then it'll be much easier. Now you'll actually enter that characterological frame, so the old frame will dissolve, and the new frame will come online, and then that'll act like a guidance, as almost an automatic process, and it works beautifully.
So powerful. Yeah, so, and that's like directly in line with pure law of attraction, which is if I can focus on the essence of what is wanted, if I can focus, which is an emotion, if I can focus on an emotion that is good feeling, then literally everything that has assembled around me, whether it be relationships or a job or a financial status or an illness or anything that has assembled around me in my previous vibration, literally is reacting to my vibration right now. Right now. The only reason and the only way things can stay the way they are, these patterns, is if you're activating similar vibration, activating similar vibration, activating similar vibration, activating similar vibration. But the moment you do something different, like what he just suggested, which is I'm going to lock on, the most simple thing ever, I'm just going to choose to lock on to this really high vibration, and the key here is momentum, and allowing the momentum on that subject to build. So if I say, oh, I'm not feeling so good, I'm going to focus on a puppy, alright, that was fun, I still don't feel so good. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's like useless. But if I say, oh, I'm not feeling so good, I want to focus on a puppy or things that I love, and then I focus on the puppy, look at the little paws, think about all the puppies in the whole world, like snuggling me all at once, like all the little tails and all the little furry. Point being, if we allow that momentum to grow, it's going to be a completely different reaction than if I'm just like, oh, I love puppies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's so powerful to realize that in essence is everything. Actually, we're handing the keys of the kingdom right now, because anything you want in life or feel that you are supposed to be doing, you can completely attain, and you can completely melt, and I use that word deliberately, you can completely melt away old patterns that are not serving or that are not pleasing fairly easily if, keyword if, you're willing to allow yourself to build a good feeling momentum, to build a coherent, better stated, a coherent vibration. And you can tell how coherent the vibration you're emitting by how good you're feeling, because your health is directly connected to how coherent you're being, right? So when I'm feeling really good, it's as if I am like one of Dr. Emoto's water crystals that's like a snowflake.
Right.
And if I'm feeling like shit, it's because I'm one of those snowflakes that's just like all chaotic and all over the place, you know? And so much can be learned from that. And I'll also say it in all my videos that I remember, that momentum is the key, momentum is the key, momentum is the key, momentum is the key. Alright, so some closing thoughts, some feelings, some takeaway feelings, some takeaway thoughts. some gifts for the watcher and for us, for being the speakers.
Mm-hmm.
So let's tap into appreciation first off, and then everything just flows from there. So I like to start in the rainforest because it's just so obvious why I love the rainforest. And I think it's probably pretty easy for anybody watching to grasp why they love the rainforest. But let's just talk a little bit about it. So one of them would be the overwhelming, abundant life energy that's coming forth. It's raining every day or most days. There's life on life on life. There's life that's supporting life that's supporting life that's supporting life that's supporting. So it's that fractal abundance vibration. And I think that's a really good thing to focus on, is how like the roots of a tree, they root out and they create opportunity for other things to attach to the roots or work around the roots or work within the roots as a system, or maybe the roots are now a structure, you know. So it's understanding like any kind of structure that I can make with my body, with my mind, with my voice is going to automatically create structure and magnify anything else that anybody else is creating. And I think that is what this is for me, is I know I can't be the whole rainforest, but I know that I can root out. And as I root out, I become symbiotic with anyone else who wants to work within that direction.
Right, and I like the analogy, or I like focusing on the rainforest as a kind of pinnacle. Because if we think about, you know, the place where there's the most bioharmony, how many different organisms are living all together in a small space and they're all working together in this beautiful harmony, rainforest is probably one of the best examples, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, I'm greatly appreciative of these examples that we have to help guide us in our personal lives. Because if the world in a rainforest can exist so sublimely perfectly, in such wonderful, beautiful harmony, where the tree creates this microclimate in this environment so that it can house and support other beings through its love and through its expressing its divine nature and its soul mission, you might say. What happens when we do that as a people? What happens when we do that as a people?
Well, actually, this is a great example, because he started to root out with Stillness in the Storm, and I was just a random person who found refuge within that information, and furthermore found refuge in the fact that there was other people looking and thinking and feeling in this direction. So that's a perfect example of what we're talking about. Just the fact that I found Stillness in the Storm, and I used that as kind of one of my leverage steady points to continue on growing and evolving in my unique direction, and becoming obviously symbiotic with that in the not so long term is really rewarding to witness.
Exactly. So I mean, in a sense, you know, when you go out on a limb, when you're vulnerable, when you take some risk, when you say, screw it, I'm gonna just do what my soul calls me to do, then something beautiful happens. You can actually create a space where you inspire and encourage others. Just like the trees of the tree in the rainforest. It's sending out its branches, and then it's allowing other things to come in and dwell in that space. So, you know, we each have this opportunity to reach out and strive to live our highest and best and in alignment with our values and our path. And when we have faith in ourselves and the universe that can happen, then beautiful things will happen. You know, especially if we follow love in our hearts, if we follow goodness, fellowship, truth, honor, duty, responsibility. These are the kind of vitalizing and life-giving values, spiritual values, as I like to call them. So when you find that spiritual core, that essence inside of you, and you feed energy into that, the interesting thing is you're serving yourself, and you automatically start serving others by magic, and then we come to this beautiful space that we have here.
So beautifully said. So let the fruit that these trees are creating be the nectar on the dry lips that find it.
Yes.
So grateful. Check out the Cosmic Embassy on YouTube and Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff. And as well, check out Stillness in the Storm on the internet. You can just type in Stillness in the Storm and he's definitely the first one that pops up. Also, he's on YouTube as well.
Stillness in the Storm YouTube.
Yep.
And if you go to the website Stillness in the Storm, there's a Start Here tab where I put all of the choice information that I've gathered over the years, my own original writings, things like this. And that's a really good place to start for everybody. So.
Highly recommend anything on Stillness in the Storm. Thank you so much. We love you so much.
Much love, everybody. Until next time.
I think that was good.
I think that was great.
Actually, you know what? That was
that was
dope.
baller, dude.
That was
yeah.
Now. I think that was recorded. That was super dope. I can't wait to see that one. I might have to put that in the bloopers.
Right.
Just eating icicles off of logs in the forest in Virginia. Hey, universe. I'm in a frozen forest in Virginia. And I'm eating icicles. And they're so good. So good. This one, I harvested off a log. I feel like it's everywhere. So good.